Hello, uh, it's competition time. I'm Tony Higginson, and I'll be judging your competition this evening or morning, whenever it is you're viewing this. Um, I'm starting off. I used to be a member of Preston Photographic Society a few years ago. I was a member for a fair few years, and whenever competitions were being judged, I quite enjoyed it when the judge showed me a few of his images to start off, just so I got a feeling for the type of photographer that was judging my own work. So I wanted to start off with a few pictures. This is probably my favourite portrait I've ever taken. I'm a professional photographer. I make most of my living photographing weddings, but I do some photography workshops and things like that, landscape photography workshops. But I want to start off with my favourite portrait. There's a picture of a young girl called Amber who I photographed on a beach. The lighting was wonderful, and it was just probably my favourite portrait. I don't want to dwell on these images for too long. This is that was taken outside, that one with a reflector. This one was taken in a studio with studio lighting. And I like that kind of clean, colourful, high key look in studio portraiture. Landscapes is my real passion. I've selected a few landscapes I've taken within the last few weeks rather than going back through all my favourites over the last few years. This was one I took in St Anne's a couple of weeks ago when we had those lightning storms. I took this, I think three days ago, up Home Fell. I was up early at sort of 4 o'clock in the morning, and I got up there for sunrise when we were forecast some mist, and got some wonderful conditions, and the heather was all purple, and I got this shot which I really like. Here's an image. Now this is the oldest one. I took this earlier this year, just in some woods, that kind of classic misty woodland, and I wanted to include a black and white because I do love black and white photography. I think this is the last landscape I've included, and this is the kind of stuff I really enjoy, that minimalist, lone tree, sort of ethereal conditions, nice different tones and shades of colour. And I've finished with something that I don't normally shoot, but a bit of sports photography I did when I was in Les Deux Alpes a few years ago, and I just had a go at shooting a bit of action. So that's kind of the sort of stuff I do. But obviously I'm a professional photographer. I know that there's a whole range of abilities in your club, and I'm pleased that Carol asked me to judge this competition. I always enjoy looking through other people's work and seeing where they're coming from. And I'm going to judge them in reverse order. So we're going to start with this picture. I've given this 10 points out of the 20, and it's sort of a classic portrait. The subjects are nicely positioned and composed within the scene. I like the positioning. You can see everything. I think the problem is the shutter speed that's been selected. I can see from the young child's hand, there's definite movement in his hand, so I think the shutter speed is too slow, and that's why it's not quite sharp. The sort of movement right through the scene, the eyes are not sharp. So really, I've sort of judged this down on a technical point of view, because a portrait has to be sharp, the main subject has to be in focus, but I do like the tonal range that's been used, and I like the composition of it. So just a couple of tweaks and it'd be nice. Also, I'd get rid of the dummy. You don't want a dummy in a photograph. I've given this one 11 marks. It's in focus. It's nice and clean and clear. In fact, I can go full screen on these just to make them a bit bigger. I like the composition again, this kind of central positioning of these two stone pillars. I don't know I presume it's the border between Lancashire and Yorkshire, white rose and red rose, and that's why the theme, which is opposites, has been used. Photoshop's an interesting one. I think this is a photo where it would be a bit of work, but if it was me and I was entering it into a competition, I would take the time to clone these out from behind here, personally, because they're just very, very distracting. And equally, these leaves in the top right-hand corner that are nearer the photographer, they're a little bit lighter than these tones, and they kind of keep drawing the eye. So it's a good subject, but for me, there's just a few areas that could be improved on it. And that's 11 points. I can't see the score when I'm. Can't see the scores when I'm. How do I get out of this? Oh yeah, I can just go up there to the top to have a look. Right, 12 points. So this is person opposite plant. The exposure's good. There's a full range of tones from the blacks to the whites, although there is some overexposure in the top right of the frame. Everything's nice and sharp. There is some depth of field being used because the distant trees over here are blurred, which brings the focus onto the plants and onto the photographer. I think my issue really is it's all. I question myself and I say, what am I looking at? It's a woman photographing a plant, but beyond there, I'm not really. It doesn't engage me, and there's more than technicalities to a photograph. A good photograph has to engage the viewer, and to me, it doesn't really make me question why she's doing it or whatever. There's no dramatic lighting on it, so it's a decent attempt. But I think you need to focus on making it a little more dynamic in future. There's sort of the photographer and the plant takes up equal space in the photograph. So the photographer who's taken this picture is not trying to draw me in to one particular area. It's just like, here's the scene, look at it. And I need a bit of guidance as to what am I actually looking at. So I gave that 12 points. Giving this one 12 points also. It's called Gone Fishing. It's quite a funny picture in many ways, the artwork on the back of this van. This is a bit of a personal thing, but I don't really give a photographer credit for photographing somebody else's artwork. Somebody else has come up with this and you've just photographed it, so it's symmetrical. And, it's well exposed and it's sharp, but beyond there, I'm not seeing that much creativity. We've got one here. I've given this 13 points. It's called Light and Shadow Across a Window. And I initially liked this more than I do now. And what I mean by that is, when I first look at my images, I have a good look through them. I've spent, a good week looking at these pictures to kind of decide on how much I like them and how many points I'm going to give them. And this was initially higher, and I've lowered it as time has gone on. And the person who took this picture is not probably happy about that. But I initially liked the geometry of it. So we've got the vertical, the horizontal lines, we've got the light and the lovely texture and tones in this light area. But for me, the darkness is too dark. There's too much blocked out. It's just way too dominant in the image. And I wonder if not many of these images could be improved with cropping, actually. I think generally your members have all done a good job on the cropping, but this is one where I definitely think it needs some kind of cropping, or it needed some slightly different composition, because this is just too dark, Now, again, 13 points. Fusion, old and new. So we've got the old building here, the old stone tower, with the new glass building, which is like a classic sort of opposite, really. The old, the new. My bugbear in this picture is the verticals are not vertical. So I actually use a tilt shift lens for this. If I'm shooting this kind of work, I use a tilt shift lens, but obviously that's an expensive lens. I wouldn't expect everybody to have one of those to hand. However, it can easily be corrected in Photoshop. These verticals need to be vertical. So what I would do is when I was taking the actual picture, I would leave extra space, knowing that in post-processing I was going to have to correct these verticals, either in Photoshop or Lightroom. And by doing that, it would just become a much more pleasing picture to me. Also, I find the sky quite bland. In an architectural image, the sky is really important. And if there'd been some clouds blowing through, or a bit more drama in that sky, it would have added extra layers of contrast, because you would have had the sharp, clean lines of the glass against sort of the soft movement in clouds, which would have added extra interest. So good attempt, well exposed, but just needs tweaking. Now, I've given this 13 points, male and female, and it's an interesting one. And what I like about this is the creativity. I like the way that the two bodies are blended into one. So there's no join. You can't see any line. It's almost like two sides of the same being or whatever. And it's interesting. My issues with the sort of technical side of the photography, I would have preferred them to be cleaner images. So a bit more technically photographed with studio type conditions in it. If that had been the case, I think this could have been way. I would have marked this way higher. But for me, it's a bit too contrasty and a bit too over processed. But good idea, and one that I would return to and just do it with a little more finesse. 13 points, stop or go. It does what it says on the tin. Stop, red, go, green. And they've been well photographed. It's been well put together as a piece of sort of digital art. But a bit like the woman photographing the flowers earlier, the black and white picture, I look at this and it just doesn't leave me asking any questions. It doesn't sort of intrigue me. It tells me everything straight away. This is a traffic light, stop or go, and that's it. And to me, a good photograph sort of engages me as a viewer. This doesn't really, but it has been very well put together. Even the light on the shadows, how they're the same on each side, and it does work in that way. So technically good. Perhaps just have to think a bit beyond the obvious. Ice burning. Now we've got, I think, 3 of these images which are ice and fire, which are sort of classic contrast, classic opposites. And this is a fairly simple one. It's got a nice dark background. When I look at the picture, I love this reflection. To me, that's my favourite part of the image, is this reflection at the bottom and the textures in the ice. And I'd like it to have been focused on this, but we've got a slight technical error. This is a still life, so there's no reason that there should be anything out of focus here. And yet the front of this ice, which is to me the most interesting part, is out of focus. So you needed more depth of field when taking this photograph, and then it would have really drawn me into the textures of the ice. But lovely colours, and close, but no cigar. Positive, negative, 14 points. And obviously a photograph, an image that's created in Photoshop using the sort of the negative, I don't know, however she's done it, using kind of a filter or something like that. And I do like the technique. I love the tattoo, the dark tattoo on the light arm and then the white tattoo. That's my favourite bit of the whole image, this here. I almost wish it was just a photograph of that tattoo in negative, somehow incorporated. The hair's nice as well in negative, so it does work. I'm not exactly sure what she's doing. They're kind of pointing at each other, but the expression on the face is kind of blank. So it does leave me wondering, why are they... And they're not quite touching fingers. So there is a lot of questions that it does make me ask. But it doesn't really allow me to come up with any of the answers. It doesn't sort of resolve itself in my mind. But good to see experimentation in this way. Really nice black and white tones as well. And yeah, good effort. 14 points for this. Town centre or Happy Mount Park? Well, no messing about with the title on this one. I like simple titles, and that's simple. Town centre or Happy Mount Park. I like the geometry of the signpost. Strong vertical, strong horizontal line, and then the kind of sweeping diagonals of the clouds. And the landscape behind is really nice. I also really like the light on this post, the metal post, and the texture on it. Works really well. And it's a good image. What costs it being higher up is this kind of white line above the post. It's kind of like haloing. There's some kind of haloing happen above it, which makes it stop being believable. There's like a dark line as well down this side a little bit. So really it's just in the processing. You know, I could easily sort that out just with a brush. That lightness could have been taken away, and it would make it look more genuinely photographic and not as played with. So it's a little bit over processed, but a really good idea, and the composition's lovely. Even this dark sand at the bottom that runs right across the frame sort of mirrors the actual post up here. So there's a lot of good things about this picture, a lot to commend about it. Just really processing has let it down a little bit, and that's something you can return to. So I'd return to this image and just back off it a little bit, and I think there's a good photograph there. Right, we've got the second, Fire and Ice. This is 14 points. I think it's a little bit warm in terms of the colour cast, so I would tend to back off the warmth on this a little, because the ice is orange, and I like to see ice a little bit more blue. What I do really like about this image is the composition. It's lovely. The ice cubes form this nice shape, and they sit really well with this flame that's licking through sort of the left-hand side. So the composition is very strong. We've got technical error again though. The match and this ice over here is lovely and sharp, but this nearest ice cube on the left is out of focus. And just like the other image, I know once you start doing macro photography, you can struggle with depth of field, but this isn't really macro photography. It's not a tiny subject, so you're not dealing with really, really shallow depths of field. So there's no reason for this ice cube here to be out of focus. And again, that cost it, because I want this ice cube in focus. It's a still life. So a good effort, just slightly let down with the technical side, and maybe the warmth just could do with pulling back a bit, but good effort. Fresh Coffee, 15 marks. I like this picture because it's kind of commercial photography, and it's close to being a really good shot. I'm going to be quite picky now, but the swirl in the top of the coffee is a little bit messy. If I'd been photographing this, I would have tried to swirl that with a teaspoon to get like a circular swirl in the middle that was a little bit more pleasing. It's nice how the coffee beans, and it's sort of ground coffee against fresh pure coffee beans, they work well, and that's the opposite. Do you see how the beans join in the middle at the bottom? It would be nice if the beans carried on in the middle at the top, but they just go off to the left. So just a few more beans put in place here, and that would have been that would have helped. So just those two small sort of details pull the mark back. Otherwise, I think this could have been up there as a contender because it's really nicely exposed. The way the glass is photographed is perfect with this circle. So there's a lot to like about this image, just the details let it down. But yeah, good effort. Paid content, unpaid content. So what I do like about this photograph is, because it's a black and white obviously, I like the bold contrast, you know, the nice bright marble work on this shop and then the dark shuttering. I like the vertical lines, and I was wondering if that was a person curled up asleep, or is it just some old bedding or something left outside a shop. And this, I'm not exactly sure what that is, some kind of advert or post or something. It's technically a decent shot, but I sort of, it leaves me wondering, what is the photographer, what does the photographer want me to look at? What are they trying to say? And it's not clear enough to me. If you really have to, I was saying earlier that I want a photograph that leaves me wanting more and wants me to, I like photographs that I have to explore and look at. I look at this, I explore it, and I think, oh, what's this? Look at that, look at this cup down here. And there's lots to look at. It's been well photographed. But I can't come up with any answers. I don't really know what I'm looking at. And so in that way, it leaves me feeling dissatisfied at the end and just thinking, right, well, I'll move on, never really knowing what the photographer was trying to say. But interesting, 15 marks. Big full warehouse, small empty homeless person. Terrible title, but but whatever, we're not judging on titles. It's 5 photographs, looks like 5 photographs merged into one. A, B, C, D, E. Beginning of the alphabet. And it's obviously in black and white with a bit of colour popping of a homeless person in blue. It's not bad, not a bad shot. There's just a couple of little things that kind of niggle me. Over below the E, there's just like a line, and I'd love to see that, a slightly different crop on that panel to get rid of that line. There's no need for that line to be there. I think it's got, the photographer who took this has got potential in terms of creating these kinds of images, because good on them for thinking outside the box and trying to create something a bit different. I think I'd prefer it without the homeless person, if I'm honest. If it was just the 5 letters in black and white, if this B was a little lower and this homeless person was cut out, I think it'd just be a much stronger image. And I've almost marked it based on the fact that that person isn't there, just because I like the 5 panels together. I know the person has to be there to sort of fit in with the category of opposites, but they detract from it. I'm not really a fan of selective colour anyway. So without that person, I think it's a stronger shot. But yeah, not bad. And now I had a shot earlier. This is 15 points masculine, feminine. There was a photograph earlier with the window with the dark shadow that went down as I looked at the pictures, and this is the opposite. This one's come up. So I looked at it originally, and I was thinking, two polystyrene heads, you know. And to me, it's not really male and female. To me, it's male and child. But maybe that's just how I see it. But the more I looked at it, the more there is to enjoy about this photograph. I love the texture on the surface of the expanded polystyrene. It works really well. And the lighting, at first I thought it was underexposed, but there's some lovely, very subtle shadows and highlight, you know, and sort of highlights on the cheekbones. I think it works well. And actually, it's too late for me to mess with it now. So I'm sorry whoever took this. I probably could have continued. If I'd carried on looking for another couple of days, this probably would have gone even higher. Maybe got higher marks. But yeah, 15 points. I do think a slightly more direct lighting, just to add a little more contrast and shape to the faces, would have made it a stronger image. But yeah, good effort. New versus old, 15 marks. Of all the images, I think this is one of the best ideas. It's very easy to understand. There's the old style of reading with the Charles Dickens novels, and then there's the new style of reading with the Kindle, and a nice pair of glasses and a glass of wine. And I just think it's the colours are lovely. I really like the background, this kind of textured writing. It works well and comes together, but I'm really penalising this harshly because part of it's out of focus. These glasses are out of focus. I can kind of live with that, but this book here, it's got text on it, and I want to read that text, and I struggle because it's out of focus. And there's absolutely no need for any of this to be out of focus. And so it's probably cost it a top 3 mark, if I'm honest. This because I like the idea, and I really like the composition and the way it's put together. Just out of focus, and so it's cost it because it's a still life, and I want to see it all in detail. The moods of man, good and bad. 15 marks. This guy is not a bad man. No chance. I'm a good judge of character. He's not a bad man. No one who enters an image like this into a competition is a bad man. But I like the idea, you know. He's pulling a kind of different expression on either side of his face, and he's photoshopped it. So it's obviously black and white on this side and colour on this side. It's quite funny. I do find it quite amusing. I almost wish it had been taken a bit further, you know, so I wish this had been done in 2 separate photographs. Well, it might have been done in 2 separate photographs. I don't know. But I wish there was a bit more to it in terms of drama. You know, the lighting is a little flat. You know, I would have liked a bit more kind of studio style lighting, just to maybe if it was a single light from below, you know, to give you that horror kind of lighting, maybe just on one half, and a different type of lighting on the other half. It would have accentuated the good and the bad. I don't know, but not a bad effort, and it made me smile anyway. Opposite towers, 16 marks. Classic sort of architectural landscape subject, but a shot like this absolutely lives and dies on the fact that everything is square, lined up, matches, and it's just not vertical. This post on the right hand side is leaning. This one is kind of square but not at the top. The central piece kind of tilts off to the left, so it looks to me like the person's photographed it and then has tried to get the best compromise they can with a crop. but it needs more than that. This needs to go into Photoshop, and it needs a perspective warp on it to correct everything and get everything vertical. And again, this would have definitely been a higher mark, and I think it would be stronger in black and white as well. You've got the blues at the back and the yellows of these posts. You could really play with those colours to make this very, very dramatic. So probably of every picture entered, this is the one that should be reprocessed of them all. And it could be a really strong image, a very dramatic black and white, stark image that could easily have won this competition if it was processed better, really. And I don't know what skills the person's got, but they're not that difficult skills to learn these. Go into Photoshop and have a play with the warp tool, the perspective warp, the distort, the skew, and just get it right. And but it's well seen. The composition's spot on. I wouldn't have done anything different myself. It's just in the second part of the post-production, and that's just as important as the photography nowadays. Egg shadow, 16 marks. When I was learning photography, it was recommended to me that I read a book, and it's called, I've even forgot the name of it. Is it called Light Shadow Magic or something like that? I forget what it's called. But it was all about photographing still life, how to use sort of rim lights and main lights, fill lights, how light works. It was really, really interesting. And the people who can photograph glass and just solid objects really skillfully, it's a real craft, and I do enjoy seeing it. The thing with this egg, it's been lit very simply, and to me it almost doesn't look like an egg. It looks like an oval cutout. There doesn't seem to be the right curves and shapes for an egg, and if there was even a little reflection on the back, that was reflecting back up off the paper to show me the sort of three-dimensionality of the egg, this would have been a much stronger image. But to me, it just looks like an oval cutout of some gradation on some paper or something. Just doesn't really quite look like. I mean, the person might be saying, "This is an egg. I photographed an egg. You're an idiot." And fair play. But it just doesn't feel eggy enough to me. And it's such a simple image that this has to absolutely shine as the star. And to me, it's a good shot, but it's just not quite there for me. Seemed like I was talking loads of rubbish as I was talking there, but I hope you understand what I mean. It needs a bit of extra lighting. 16 marks. This is a classic shot. I think it's in Manchester, this building. Complementary colours. So the colours orange and blue, which are opposite on the colour wheel. You need to know your colour wheel if you're into photography. It's quite key. And this person has done a good job of correcting all the verticals in Photoshop. They've used the warp tool, and they've got all the verticals nice and straight, which works really well. I find the colours a little flat. If it was me, considering this is a photograph which is largely about colour, because it's about the orange and the blue, I find this orange a bit dull. I would have been tempted to pull these oranges and up the vibrance and the punch of them to really contrast with that blue. I mean, the blue's really strong there. It's a very strong, vibrant blue. I would have liked the orange a bit more vibrant. And compositionally, it's okay, but it's kind of how this corner dips off out of the frame. It's kind of a bit messy up here. I'm just wondering if there could have been a composition which was a little bit more dynamic. But overall, good effort. 16 marks. The tortoise and the hare, fast and slow. I don't think it needed the fast and slow. We know what a tortoise and a hare is all about. But a good photograph. I'm giving this one 16 marks. It's a little bit grainy, which I don't mind in a black and white photograph. the main subject, this lady, she's nice and sharp. The bloke at the back running, he's nice and sharp also. And there's this dog. And this is just a piece of, it just amuses me and makes me laugh, you know. She's got her shades on. She looks miserable. He's in a world of his own at the back, jogging away. He's got his eyes shut. And then there's a dog in the middle. And it's just a piece of social documentary of now. That's 2020. And I'm sure if you look back on this picture in 20 years, they'll say, oh, do you remember when we used to wear these earphones on wires and different things, and the clothing that they're wearing? So, yeah, nice photograph. Well executed, and the composition's good also. So, yeah, good effort, that. Now, this is the final Fire and Ice picture. And this is called Fire and Ice. This is my favourite because, as I talked about in an earlier picture, it's the ice, it's the texture in the ice that I really enjoy. The lovely colours and swirling, the dashes and the fractures in the ice and the colours and the swirls, it's lovely. It's going out of focus on the left again here. I can kind of live with that in this image because that's over to the side. So that is good. My thoughts are, seeing as it's so interesting in the centre and this is where it's at, why isn't it bigger in the frame? So I would have been tempted to somehow zoom in and make it even a proper macro shot of the ice. And that could have been a wonderful image. But as it is, it's definitely the best of the three for me. So good job, 17 marks. Another 17 marks, Cold Snap, Hot and Cold. When you use a wide angle lens, as has been used here, you often, well, not often, you sometimes get this strange, I'll call it a phenomenon, where one side's blue and one side's orange. And I've had it myself, and I've been processing images at home and thinking, what's going on here with the colours? It's weird, but you do get it with a wide angle lens sometimes. And sometimes the join between the two is really quite stark. But you get here the blue on the left and the warmth on the right. I love these reflections. The photographers avoided using a long exposure, and I love long exposure photography, but I also think sometimes it's overused, and here the reflections are wonderful with this the sort of dappled reflections. They look great. Composition's good, everything's nice and vertical. My main issue is the overexposed sky over here on the top right hand side. That needed pulling back because it really, really keeps drawing my eye. You've got to watch out for those highlights, and that's what cost it a top 3 mark in the end, with those overexposed clouds. But definitely a good effort, and just go back and pull those highlights down a bit, and it's a nice shot, that, and I'm sure it'd make a nice black and white as well. Hold on, I seem to have missed an 18. I'll come back to that. That might be in 3rd place. I thought I'd change that to an 18, but I can't be certain. Right. I'm confused now about my scoring. Maybe this is 3rd place, but I'll have to do the scores at the end once I've seen where I'm coming up to. But here we go. It's annoying, this. I'm just going to quickly... Yeah. Yeah, this is 3rd place with 18 marks. That's right. I thought that other one wasn't in the top 3, but... Yeah, I've given this one 3rd place, 18 marks. I think it's a really good piece of photography. I love the contrast because it's called groups and loners. So the opposites are these 3 that are grouped together, and this bird over here that's the loner. But to me, the opposites are the metal, the man-made metal, all these bolts and the vertical structures and these wonderful curves, and then the birds, just a natural, obviously just, I mean, they are like pests a lot of the time, but the contrast between the animal and the metal, I think it's a brilliant contrast. It doesn't need to be groups and loners, but there's that added to it as well. The composition's great, how this bird's looking out this way, these three are sat together. Again, I've got an issue with this one, and it's the fact that it's not vertical. You know, this is sloping off, it's all sloping off to the left. Had this been photographed and corrected so that it was all vertical, this was my easy first place. Guaranteed this was my easy first place, because for me it's my favourite photograph. Had it not all been leaning off to the side. You know, the photographers made this row of bolts vertical and left everything else to just be as it is, and that doesn't really work for me. You know, had that been all level, this is the kind of image I'd want on my wall. And to me, that's like the highest compliment that I can give an image, is to say that's an image I would like on my wall. I'd like to look at that on a daily basis on my wall, and this is that kind of photograph. But it'd have to be level. Maybe I've got a bit of OCD over that, but that's just how I am. But really well seen, superb shot, and just go back and have a look. I'll tell you what, it sounds like your club needs to have a session on using the perspective correction tools in Lightroom and Photoshop, because as I say, normally it's all about cropping. Judges come in and crop images and say, have you tried this crop? I think all your crops are bang on. It's just getting all your verticals and your levels sorted. Whoever did the orange and blue glass structure, get them to show everybody how to use it, because he's used it on that one. Now in second place with 19 points, we've got this. That's a really well photographed still life. Lovely contrast between black and white. You know, they've not held back. This wouldn't have worked if it was full of greys. We don't want to see mid-tones in a shot like this. I want the full range of contrast from pure black to pure white. And you'd think this is fairly easy to photograph in some ways, but it isn't. It's really, really difficult to get this kind of photograph. The way the glass has been handled, even this rim, you see the rim, there's no shadows, there's no reflections of the photographer. It's just been really well lit. The composition's lovely. And it's just a really good piece of photography, that. So a well-deserved second place. And my hats are off to... This is a good photographer, whoever did this, because they know what they're doing. No beginner can create an image like that, guaranteed. And the winner, I can hear everyone gasping. What? Who is this judge? How can that win? It's a picture of a pavement or the edge of a building, but I just think it's really well seen. All the corners, everything lines up nicely. It's all about diagonals and shadow and light. What's the title? Path of Light Over Darkness. Yeah. It's just a lovely shot to look at. Even this stone here, this piece of pavement or whatever it is on the right hand side, the way there's a gradation from the dark to the light here, and then the run that runs through the centre. They've spent time, this photographer's really spent time and created a composition that all sits together. There's nothing jarring about it. It's just something to be enjoyed. And is this the kind of picture I'd have on my wall? Yeah, it is, because it's a really simple study of the kind of scene that we walk past every day and we never look at. And I like that. I like it when a photographer can draw my attention to the mundane and show it to me in a really interesting way. And that's what the photographer's done here. It said, hey, you walk past these kind of scenes every day. Look how I see it. This is my vision. And it's been put together in a really beautiful way. So hats are off to this photographer. Well done. And a really well-deserved first place with 20 points. And that's me done. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I've waffled on a bit. I've gone on a bit longer than I'd intended. I think I've gone on now for like 3/4 of an hour. But, you know, once I get going, I can't shut up, me. And I wanted to give each image, you know, every image has been photographed for a reason, and it deserves a bit of time spending on it. So, well done. And I hope you're all keeping safe and well. And I hope to see you sometime. Goodbye.